Hello, all you freedom-loving people. Iran struck back after Israel launched a massive attack from within Iran against Iranian leaders and nuclear facilities, and the forces behind the LA riots and the No Kings protests scheduled for Saturday continue to surface. Okay, let's get into it. The situation in the Middle East heated up dramatically on Friday. Israel launched an airstrike on the Iranian capital Tehran on Friday morning at 3:30, with explosions heard in many parts of the city. Meanwhile, explosions were also heard near Iran's Fordow and Natanz nuclear facilities. The airstrikes are believed to have targeted the sites of key nuclear programs. The IDF says that Iran has enough enriched uranium to build several bombs within days, and it needs to act against this imminent threat. The IDF statement said, "The state of Israel has no choice but to fulfill the obligation to act in defense of its citizens and will continue to do so everywhere it is required to do so, as we have done in the past." Subsequently, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared the Operation Rising Lion. Sirens sounded across Israel late on Thursday night. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz declared a special state of emergency across the entire country. All Israeli embassies were also closed globally. The full extent of the damage to Iran cannot be independently verified at this time, but the Israeli military said that it had relied on high-quality intelligence to precisely target aspects of Iran's nuclear program. Multiple explosions were reported in different parts of Iran, indicating at least 3 rounds of blasts. Reportedly, some of the main air bases across Iran in major cities including Tehran, Tabriz, Isfahan, and Kermanshah were targeted. Several major airports, military infrastructure, missile launchers, drone storage sites, long-range missile systems, container-based launch mechanisms, and the main nuclear facilities have all been attacked. The International Atomic Energy Agency has confirmed that Natanz was among the sites that was targeted. Natanz is at the heart of Iran's nuclear facilities and ballistic missile program. And as of now, it has at least been attacked 7 times. Videos circulating online show multiple explosions in Natanz following the Israeli strikes. Israel also attacked Iran's underground Fordow nuclear facility. There are also concerns about elevated radiation levels at the site, but so far Iranian officials have denied this. UN nuclear watchdog chief Rafael Grossi told the Security Council that the above-ground pilot enrichment plant at Iran's Natanz nuclear site has been completely destroyed. Grossi said at present, Iranian authorities are informing us of attacks on 2 other facilities, namely the Fordow fuel enrichment plant and at Isfahan. And there are concerns that the range of war may expand in the region as tensions rise in the oil-rich Middle East, but some predict that this is no longer a concern since the main leaders of the Iranian military have already been killed. At least 20 senior Iranian commanders, including the highest-ranking military leaders and the nuclear scientists, were killed today. There was also intense air defense activity reported near the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's residence. So far, Iran has responded by launching hundreds of drones toward Israel, which needed a few hours to get there, so Israel took them all down. A ballistic missile was also launched at Israel by the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen that impacted near the southern west bank of Israel. The missile hit the Palestinian town of Sa'ir. This attack by Israel on Iran was 8 months in the making. Netanyahu said that he had issued an order in November for the military to prepare for the strike, so this may explain why everything seems so well planned. There were reports that the Israeli Mossad spy agency smuggled weapons into Iran ahead of the strikes, and they used those weapons to target Iran's defenses from inside of Iran. Reportedly, a base for launching explosive drones was established inside Iran, and reportedly the drones were activated during the attack to target missile launchers at an Iranian base near the capital. The reports also claim that Israel had also smuggled precision weapons into central Iran and positioned them near surface-to-air missile systems. So this explains why their strikes were so precise. Netanyahu also claimed that Iran accelerated its push toward developing a nuclear weapon following the killing of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. Nasrallah was killed in an Israeli attack in September of 2024. Israel's military has described Iran as a global threat, and today Israel released a photo depicting Iran at the center, surrounded by circles representing the expanding reach of its influence. The Israeli military said, "Israel is not the end goal, it's only the beginning. We had no other choice but to act." At the same time, Netanyahu made it clear that the United States was informed ahead of time about the strike. President Trump also confirmed that he knew about the strike. President Trump praised the strike on Iran as a very successful attack, and he warned Tehran to return to negotiations before it's too late. President Trump said, "We of course support Israel, obviously, and supported it like nobody has ever supported it." He explained that Iran had ignored a 60-day ultimatum that he had previously issued. He said, "Iran should listen to me. I gave them a 60-day warning, and today is day 61. So President Trump cautioned that Tehran must now come to the table to make a deal before it's too late. It will be too late for them. You know, the people I was dealing with are dead, the hardliners." But at the same time, President Trump told NBC News that they missed the opportunity to make a deal. Now they have another opportunity. We'll see. They're calling me to speak. There's no word about whether President Trump talked with Iranian leaders yet, but President Trump and Netanyahu held a phone call. This was their second call in 2 days to discuss the strikes and the counterattacks from Iran. There are also concerns that the range of war will expand in the region due to the ongoing strikes, as it also heightens tensions in the oil-rich Middle East. But some predict that this is no longer a concern since the main leaders of the Iranian military have already been killed. But it's still unclear if they will really move forward and negotiate with the U.S. over the nuclear deal. The Israeli military's head of operations warned that one of the most important things now is the civilian and military home front, because the enemy's response will come, and we must minimize the damage, maintain functional continuity, and preserve our offensive capabilities. There are also reports that 2 senior Iranian lawmakers publicly called on Supreme Leader Khamenei to authorize nuclear weapons development. In remarks that were aired in Iranian media, a prominent legislator said, "As members of parliament, we humbly ask the Supreme Leader to give the order allowing Iran to possess nuclear bombs." And Iran's new Revolutionary Guards chief commander also said, "Israel's attack will certainly not go unanswered, and the gates of will soon be opened upon them. Israel will face a painful fate." A few hours later, Iran launched 2 waves of ballistic missiles at Israel. According to the IDF, Iran fired fewer than 100 surface-to-surface missiles, most of which failed to hit their targets, and a U.S. official confirmed that the United States assisted in shooting down missiles that were targeting Israel. This means that the U.S. is just helping Israel to protect itself. But as Secretary of State Marco Rubio has stated, the U.S. is not involved in the attacks. Rubio said, "We're not involved in strikes against Iran, and our top priority is protecting American forces in the region." California federal judge Charles Breyer had ruled on Thursday that President Trump must return control of the National Guard to California Governor Gavin Newsom. But this ruling was blocked, and President Trump has been allowed to keep the National Guard deployed. Newsom accused President Trump of violating federal law and the Constitution by deploying the National Guard without the governor's authorization, and he sought a court to limit federal interference. Judge Breyer initially said that President Trump's actions were illegal, both exceeding the scope of his statutory authority and violating the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution. He must therefore return control of the California National Guard to the governor of the state of California forthwith. The order would have taken effect at noon on Friday, but the Trump administration promptly filed an appeal with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The lower court had tried to reject Trump's characterization of the protests as riots, claiming that the demonstrations were far from riots and that the protests fell within core civil liberties protected by the First Amendment. But in court, Justice Department Attorney Brett Samadi argued that the president had acted in accordance with the law and that the court had no authority to review his decision. He considered that the governor was only a formal intermediary, with whom consultation was not required by law. Nicholas Green, an attorney representing California, argued that President Trump violated Section 12406, which explicitly requires that if the president wants to mobilize the National Guard, he should issue the order through the governor, and that the section protects the state's dominance over law enforcement. Judge Breyer also noted that the presence of the military itself heightened tensions with protesters, and it undermined California's ability to use the National Guard for missions such as fighting hill fires and combating drug smuggling. However, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals immediately ruled on the same day to temporarily allow President Trump to maintain control of the California National Guard, postponing the lower court order that had barred the deployment. The ruling does not mean that the Court of Appeals will ultimately uphold the Trump administration's actions, but for now, the command of the National Guard remains in the hands of the president. The Court of Appeals has scheduled a hearing for next Tuesday to review the substance of the Breyer decision. This case highlights the conflict between politicians of both parties over immigration policy. Also on Thursday, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem said at a press conference that she wanted to liberate Los Angeles. She also gave notice that the IRS is now involved in the hunt for the financial backers of the riots and unrest in Los Angeles. However, midway through the meeting, Democratic U.S. Senator Alex Padilla started heckling Noem, and he was handcuffed and dragged out of the meeting by federal agents. The incident has also triggered a heated debate between the two parties. The Wall Street Journal's editorial board believes that Newsom is taking the immigration issue as a political gamble. The editorial board wrote, President Trump's escalation in migrant deportation has put him in a tight spot with progressive Democrats, and on Tuesday, the governor nominated himself as leader of the anti-Trump resistance. Newsom has tried to convey the message saying, authoritarian regimes begin by targeting people who are least able to defend themselves. He's assaulting the First Amendment. He's taking a wrecking ball to our founding fathers' historic project. Newsom seems to believe that President Trump and Stephen Miller will overplay their hand. But the Wall Street Journal's editorial board suggests that the Democrats may be missing the point. The article states, the problem for Mr. Newsom and all Democrats is that the Biden administration so botched the border issue that the public for now is giving Mr. Trump the benefit of the doubt to fix the problem, all the more so when the streets of Los Angeles erupt in protest that turn violent and wave Mexican flags, and Democrats are slow to denounce and quell them. The ongoing riots in Los Angeles have sparked another controversy: Mexico's alleged ownership of much of the western United States. One rioter shouted, "This is our city and this was Mexico. You can't kick us out of the land that was ours." Media personalities and senior Mexican leaders also share a similar opinion. Some Mexican leaders threatened intervention in the demonstrations and even organized mobilization on behalf of their countrymen. A large part of the western United States did belong to Mexico, but it was 200 years ago. The United States acquired this portion of land in the Mexican-American War between 1846 and 1848. The war began with the annexation of the Republic of Texas. Then it became an all-out war that saw the U.S. acquire California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico. The war ended with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. The former Mexican territories in the United States have long been speculated to have been Aztlan, and that theory has played a prominent role in Spanish-speaking politics for decades. Political activists in the 1960s and 70s advocated for Spanish speakers to reclaim what they believed to be their ancestral homeland from English speakers. In modern context, pundits are invoking Mexico's prior ownership of the territory, and some groups are even creating a flag to represent the region. The far-left Union del Barrio activist group mentions Aztlan in its manifesto, calling on the oppressed people in occupied Mexico to join the process of building a revolutionary, reunified, and socialist Mexico, ultimately advancing Simon Bolivar's dream of a unified continent. Speaking on MSNBC this week, former Univision anchor Maria Elena Salinas highlighted Mexico's historic ownership of the southwestern United States, especially Los Angeles. She said, "I was born in LA. That's where my roots are. That's where I started my career. It's almost 50% Hispanic. Remember that California was part of Mexico. All of the Southwest is Mexico, so the roots are really deep in that region." On Monday, Mexican Senate President Gerardo Fernandez Noroña claimed that the Latino population in the southwestern United States has a national heritage there. He mentioned a conversation that he had with President Trump at the Trump Tower during his first election 16 days before President Trump's first inauguration. He said on the Senate floor this week, "And I said, yes, we'll build the wall and pay for it, but we'll do it according to the 1830 map of Mexico." Gerardo held up a map of the 1830 Mexican border during those remarks, showing Texas and California as part of Mexico. He also said maybe a third, at least a quarter of the North American territory was part of Mexico until 1846. We were stripped of these territories. However, the senior leadership in Mexico City has made it clear that it sees planned taxes on remittances in the Big Beautiful Bill as an issue of at least comparable substance to deportations. The Big Beautiful Bill in the House passed form includes a 3.5% tax on remittances. Some Senate Republicans have suggested that the figure is far too low. Senator Eric Schmidt this week introduced legislation to up the rate to 15%. Many immigrant workers send funds back to their home countries, including to Mexico. Mexico received an estimated $62.53 billion in remittances from the United States in 2024 alone, accounting for roughly 3.4% of the Mexican economy. In the background of Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass has also come under the spotlight. Years ago, Karen Bass was a prominent member of a far-left group, the Venceremos Brigade, or VB. They are pro-communist Cuban activists. The group is currently embedded in the Chinese Communist Party-linked financial network that is behind the Los Angeles protests. VB is an activist group that is sympathetic to the Communist Revolution in Cuba, and it is also linked to violent groups such as the Weather Underground. The VB website touts that in the last 50 years, approximately 10,000 people from the U.S. have traveled to Cuba with the VB, including elected officials, labor leaders, artists and entertainers, academics, activists, and social movement leaders. And in the 1970s, Bass was one of them. Decades ago, the New York Times obtained a 400-page FBI report from 1976 which described Cuba's goal. With Cuban intelligence sway over the VB, Cuba was to place its assets and allies into positions of power inside the U.S. government. Bass also does not hide her pro-Cuban Communist Party attitude. She eulogized communist Cuban dictator Fidel Castro when he died in 2016, referring to the revolutionary strongman as commander-in-chief. Nowadays, the VB is physically sponsored by a communist organization known as the People's Forum. The People's Forum is part of wealthy Marxist businessman Neville Singham's broad financial network. We talked a few days ago about the People's Forum being one of the driving forces behind this LA riot, and VB also has ties to other Singham-affiliated organizations such as the far-left Breakthrough News and the radical revolutionary organization, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the PSL. The PSL is also a key organizer of the protest in LA and other cities. We reported yesterday that Representative Anna Paulina Luna said that the House Oversight Committee will be calling Singham to testify regarding the funding of a communist group that is allegedly tied to both the Los Angeles Riots and the Chinese Communist Party. And today, House Republicans launched the investigation targeting Neville Singham. And as Luna said, if he refuses to appear, he will be subpoenaed, and if he ignores that, he will be referred to the DOJ for prosecution. And Luna also disclosed to Benny Johnson that George Soros, if voted, might be called to testify to Congress for funding leftist riots and radical groups.
We'll see if Comer bites on sending the subpoena to Soros, but either which way, every single time Democrats call for a subpoena and try to pull a parliamentary on Soros, on Elon Musk, I will then try to pull the parliamentary on Soros. So they'll have to choose.
George Soros has been sowing these seeds for the better part of the last 3 decades. Why hasn't he ever been subpoenaed? Like, are Republicans just so weak?
Benny, I think that this should have been done a really long time ago. Yeah. And I'm only one member and I'm only one vote. We need more people up here with the same mindset. I think that there is probably, I'd say like a quarter of Republicans would have no issue subpoenaing him. I think, though, that there are people that are scared about re-election, and George Soros is a billionaire. I actually fought George Soros funding in both of my elections. There were groups tied to him that came after me to the tunes of millions of dollars. But, this job for me is so I can help the country. And so it is what it is. And I think that that's what they're concerned about.
And if foreign actors are involved, lawmakers warn it could amount to treason. So far, according to Data Republican, 31 NGOs have been identified that are behind the thousands of protests this Saturday. Also, Data Republican reported that the No Kings rally this Saturday is tied to 31 left-wing NGOs, including the ACLU Foundation, Black Voters Matter Fund, and Color of Change. And if you follow the grant money, you'll find the usual suspects: Open Society, Schwab Charitable, and Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave a comment below the video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after subscribing. And please share this video with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth.